Have you ever felt like the harder you try, the more life pushes back? You chase, you grind, you plan every detail, and somehow it still slips through your hands. We've been told that success belongs to the relentless, that if we don't control everything, we'll lose everything. But let me ask you something. What if that's the real trap? What if the need to control is what's keeping you stuck? Every time you force, you disconnect. You disconnect from the flow, from your inner clarity, from the natural rhythm that leads you not through pressure but through precision. Here's the truth. The more you force, the more resistance you create. Not because you're weak, but because you're out of sync. You're swimming upstream when life is trying to carry you. The ancient Stoics saw this centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius didn't teach people to hustle harder. He taught them to align, to become immovable inside, while flowing with the nature of things. They didn't chase. They listened. They moved with clarity, not with force, with stillness. In this video, we're not here to escape effort. We're here to replace wasted energy with intelligent motion. You'll learn how to stop fighting the current and start moving with it. You'll see how Stoicism isn't about staying silent. It's about learning when to act and when to let go. So take a breath, let the noise fade, and let's begin your journey toward effortless alignment. To flow, you must first understand what you're flowing with. And for the Stoics, that starts with something ancient, something unseen, something they called logos. There is order, even in chaos, a quiet rhythm beneath the noise, a structure behind every storm, a pattern running through the mess that, if you're still enough, can be seen and followed. The ancient Stoics called this invisible structure logos, not religion, not blind faith, not mysticism dressed in poetry, but rational order, divine logic, the force that keeps the universe from collapsing in on itself. To Marcus Aurelius, it was the soul of the universe. To Epictetus, it was the reason behind everything that happens. It wasn't something you prayed to, it was something you aligned with. Because logos isn't passive. It's not just the scaffolding of reality, it's the quiet hand shaping everything that happens inside it. It explains why pain, at the right time, becomes clarity. Why breakdown is often the beginning of transformation. Why the things that seem like delays often turn out to be divine acceleration. You can't see logos, but you can feel it. You know when you're out of sync, and you definitely know when you're in it. Some call it alignment. Some call it flow. Some call it intuition, the Tao, or even the physics of entropy turning into elegant complexity. Different names. Same truth. There is a current, a direction, and you are either resisting it or riding it. Most people resist, not because they're wrong, but because they were taught to control everything. They fight the flow. They panic when things don't go to plan. They cling to paths that have expired. They chase what isn't ready and hold on to what's already gone. That's not strength. That's fear dressed up as productivity, But the Stoic sees differently. He doesn't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" He asks, "What is this shaping me into?" Because Logos doesn't waste experience. It doesn't drop chaos into your life for no reason. It trims what no longer serves you. It redirects you when you're off course. It slows you down not to punish you, but to protect you from going somewhere you're not meant to be. What looks like rejection is often protection. What feels like silence is often preparation. And the doors that close without warning are usually answers you were too distracted to ask for. But to understand Logos, you must first create the conditions to hear it. And that begins with stillness. Not stillness in your schedule, but in your spirit. Stillness doesn't mean stopping. It means aligning. It's the opposite of reaction. It's observation. It's awareness. It's walking into life with both eyes open and both hands free. Because Logos doesn't scream. It doesn't panic. It doesn't try to convince you. It whispers, and only the quiet mind can hear it. So the question isn't, how do I control what happens? The question is, how do I align with what already knows the way? Because the more you fight what is, the more exhausted you become. But the more you learn to listen, the more precise your movement becomes. You don't have to guess. You don't have to chase. You observe. You align. You act when it's time and trust when it's not. This is the Stoic path. Not blind surrender, but intelligent submission to a system greater than you. You still show up. You still train. You still speak. But you stop trying to bend reality to your will, and instead, you let Logos sharpen your will to match reality. That is real strength. That is alignment. Logos is already working, whether you believe in it or not. But when you do believe, when you choose to see its hand in everything, you stop needing guarantees. You stop forcing clarity. You stop chasing things that were never meant to be yours. You start living differently, with peace, with purpose, with power that no one can take away, because it doesn't come from control. It comes from trust, and trust begins with stillness. So slow down, breathe, listen. Logos is always speaking. The question is, are you still enough to hear it? Stillness is often misunderstood. We confuse it with passivity, with apathy, with doing nothing. To most, stillness feels like slowing down in a world obsessed with acceleration. It feels like weakness in a culture addicted to noise. And yet, to the Stoics, stillness wasn't the end of action. It was the beginning of intelligent action. Stillness was never the absence of movement. It was the presence of power. Not force, not reaction, but the inner calm that precedes every decisive move. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of armies, ruler of an empire, wrote, Meditations, one of the most profound works of philosophy ever recorded, while camped on the edges of war. Not in a monastery, not in retreat, but in the storm. He didn't escape chaos. He stood inside it, anchored, centered, clear. Because stillness is not about your surroundings. It's about your center. When the world speeds up, stillness becomes a rebellion. When people around you chase attention, you return to intention. When everyone reacts, you watch, you observe. You wait not from fear, but from clarity. Stillness makes you precise in a distracted world. The Stoics practiced stillness in 3 powerful forms, each more difficult and more transformative than the last. Stillness of the body. Not laziness, not slouching into passivity, but deliberate restraint. To sit with composure, to breathe when you want to rush, to hold yourself upright in posture and presence, especially when everything in you wants to flinch. The Stoic body doesn't broadcast panic. It holds. It grounds. It reflects internal control in physical form. This is why leaders who move slowly often hold more power than those who yell, because their body speaks the language of calm. Stillness of the mind. This is the battlefield. The mind is always sprinting, jumping from past regrets to future fears, almost never present. Stillness of the mind isn't about silencing all thoughts. It's about seeing them, noticing them come and go, and choosing which ones deserve your energy. Most people let thoughts happen to them. The Stoic learns to happen to thoughts. You can't stop the waves, but you can stop getting dragged by every one. That's mindfulness. That's sovereignty. That's where wisdom begins. Stillness of the will. The rarest, the hardest, the most powerful. Stillness of the will is when you stop trying to force your way through life. You stop grasping. You stop begging the world to match your timeline. And yet, you don't give up. You still move. You still act. But from a different energy, not from desperation, but from alignment, from trust in a bigger order, from a deeper knowing that you don't need to control everything, only yourself. People feel this stillness. They may not have the words, but they sense it in your voice, in your posture, in your presence. There's no tension, no panits, no chaos hiding behind your eyes. Just presence. Just real power. We live in a culture that worships hustle, that treats exhaustion as a badge of honor, that believes the faster you move, the more value you have. But here's what the Stoics knew without stillness. Your actions become reactions. Your decision become emotional escapes. Your success becomes performative. And your peace, it disappears. Stillness doesn't make you slower. It makes you unstoppable. It gives your intuition space to rise. It gives your emotions time to settle. And it gives Logos that quiet, cosmic intelligence room to be heard. Because Logos doesn't compete with noise. It waits for silence. Stillness is not inaction. It's precision before execution. It's the foundation beneath every great decision, every resilient mindset, every meaningful step forward. So the next time life feels too loud, don't match it. Don't speed up. Don't add more noise. Slow down. Return to stillness. Let the surface settle and listen. Because the next move, the one that will change everything, won't come from panic. It will come from stillness. Everyone's moving, running, doing, rushing from one thing to the next, as if urgency is a badge of honor. as if motion alone means progress. But the Stoics were never impressed by busy people. They weren't seduced by constant action. They didn't ask, "How much are you doing?" they asked, "Why are you doing it?" Because not all movement is progress, and not all effort is wise. Action without clarity is noise. It burns time. It drains energy. And it feeds ego more than it feeds purpose. Most people aren't lacking effort. They're drowning in impulse. That itchy, frantic energy that says, "I have to fix this now. I need to prove something. I can't sit still." Impulse is loud, emotional, always urgent. It's not thinking, it's reacting. And it often disguises itself as ambition. But under pressure, impulse cracks. It leads you to overcommit, to say yes when you meant no, to chase outcomes that don't even belong to you. Intention, on the other hand, is quiet, deliberate, almost invisible. It doesn't demand attention because it doesn't need permission. Intention speaks in precision, in alignment, in calm. It's the decision you make before the world even notices you moved. It's that internal compass that says, "This is mine to do. This is who I am." And that's enough. Marcus Aurelius said, "Let each thing you do, say, or intend be done as if it were the last act of your life." There's nothing impulsive about that. It's not about fear of dying. It's about reverence for living. It's about acting like your energy matters. Because it does. When your next move could be your last, you don't rush it. You weigh it. You sharpen it. And then you execute clean, focused, detached from the outcome. That's Stoic action. So many people get stuck in motion without meaning. They're constantly adjusting their goals, chasing validation, tweaking tactics. But the truth is, the outer game only works when the inner logic is solid. If your action isn't rooted in clarity, then no strategy will save it. That's why the Stoic doesn't move first. He sees first, he understands first, and then he moves. That clarity doesn't come from motivation. It comes from philosophy. From sitting still long enough to ask, is this aligned with the kind of person I've chosen to be? Not the kind of person the world pushes me to be. Not the image I think others want, but the grounded, value-driven identity I return to when I'm not pretending. When that's the source of your action, you don't need to be loud. You don't need to be fast. You just need to be clear. And in a world full of noise, clarity cuts through everything. Here's the secret. You don't need 10 steps. You need one powerful question asked honestly, consistently, and without apology. Is this coming from impulse or from intention? If it's impulse, pause. If it's pressure, wait. If it's performance, walk away. But if it's clarity, if it's principle, if it's rooted in values, then move. And don't hesitate. Because when action flows from alignment, you don't chase results. You attract outcomes that match your inner stance. You stop trying to be impressive and start being undeniable. The Stoic doesn't move faster than thought. He moves in rhythm with who he is. And because of that, his movements carry weight. his silence carry presence, and his results inevitably carry momentum. Let others rush. Let them burn out trying to be seen. You move from depth, from inner gravity, from a place so grounded that even if the world doesn't see it immediately, it eventually can't ignore you. Not because you forced your way in, but because you moved with such clarity. The world had no choice but to shift around you. There's a simple truth that could change everything about the way you suffer. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. Epictetus. That's it. One line. But inside that line is the most powerful mental framework ever given to us, the dichotomy of control. It's deceptively simply, but once you understand it, it reshapes how you interpret stress, loss, relationships, even ambition. Because the truth is, most of your suffering doesn't come from life itself. It comes from trying to control what was never yours to begin with. You can't control what other people think. You can't control how fast something grows. You can't control the weather, or the timing, or how someone responds to your truth, no matter how gently you deliver it. But you can control one thing. The only thing the Stoics ever told you to fully master yourself: your mindset, your response, your integrity, your choices. And that's not just philosophy. That's freedom. Most people don't suffer from lack of effort. They suffer from misplaced control. They spend 90% of their emotional energy on things that will never listen to them. They try to bend people, fix outcomes, control timelines. And every time life deviates from the script in their head, they collapse. Not because life was too cruel, but because they bet their peace on something outside their reach. But the Stoic never makes that mistake. He doesn't build his foundation on conditions he can't control. He builds it on what no one can take away. Let me tell you a story. There was a young entrepreneur, talented, driven, full of fire. He launched his startup with everything he had: time, capital, credibility. He had the plan, the forecast, the team. It all looked inevitable. Until the economy shifted. His partners backed out. His product flopped. Everything he'd built collapsed hard. And like most people, he spiraled. He tried to control what was crumbling, micromanaging every detail, chasing desperate funding, forcing deals that weren't aligned. But the more he pushed, the faster it all unraveled. Until one day, exhausted, he sat in silence and finally asked himself, "What do I actually control?" And the answer was both simple and hard to accept. Not the market, not other people, not the outcome, but he could control his habits, his standards, his ability to rebuild, but this time with more wisdom and less ego. He went quiet, still, and started again, no longer chasing hype. He built deliberately. He chose better partners, created a better product, and most importantly, anchored himself in a stronger center. Because he had learned the hard way, control is an illusion. Influence is everything. You don't need to control the storm. You just need to adjust your sail, control your breath, your attitude, your perspective, your response. And sometimes you need to do the hardest thing of all, loosen your grip. Because gripping tighter won't stop the storm. It'll just break your hands in the process. Life doesn't reward force. It rewards flow. It rewards alignment. The Stoics were not passive. They were powerful because they stopped wasting energy on noise. They didn't obsess over things they couldn't shape. They focused where it mattered: virtue, character, right action, présent effort. And when things didn't go their way, they didn't rage. They adjusted. They stayed anchored. Because their identity wasn't tied to outcomes, it was rooted in values. This is what letting go really means. Not giving up, not surrendering to fate, but choosing to redirect your power toward what's actually yours to shape. When you stop trying to control everything, you gain mastery over the one thing that matters most: yourself. And from that center, you don't force impact. You generate it, not through fear, but through presence, through calm, through direction. You don't need control. You need clarity. You need discipline. You need alignment. And when you have that, you stop chasing the world and start influencing it. Quietly, deeply, irrefutably. Because real power doesn't yell. It moves differently. When people hear the word mindfulness, they often imagine monks on mountaintops, incense, silence, an escape from the chaos of daily life. But the Stoics weren't monks. They weren't hidden away from society. They lived in it, led imperies, faced betrayal, war, politics, poverty, and still, they practiced mindfulness not in isolation, but in motion, because real mindfulness isn't about leaving the world. It's about not letting the world own you. You don't need to escape the noise. You just need to stop mistaking noise for truth. And the Stoics understood this deeply, practically, daily. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of Rome, began his mornings with journaling. Not to be poetic, but to stay sane. He wrote to clear his mind before his enemies could fill it. To anchor himself before his duties pulled him in 1,000 directions. Seneca practiced mindfulness in speech. He didn't throw words around to impress. He used them like arrows, measured, clean, and only when necessary. And Epictetus taught mindfulness in the middle of chaos, in a noisy Roman world, surrounded by wealth, power, and political madness. He preached internal discipline. To the Stoics, mindfulness wasn't about detachment. It wasn't about floating above reality. It was about engaging with life, with clarity. They believed the greatest threat to peace was not the world itself, but your reaction to it. That's why Stoic mindfulness is not soft. It's not gentle surrender. It's tactical awareness. It's choosing your perception before your perception chooses for you. They didn't use the word mindfulness, of course, but they practiced it through 3 daily disciplines. Reflection. At the end of each day, they would pause not to dwell, but to review. Where did I act with integrity? Where did I lose myself? What did I allow to control me? That should not have. This wasn't about guilt. It was about guidance, course correction. Not shame, just sharpening. Premeditatio malorum. The premeditation of misfortune. They visualized things going wrong on purpose. Not to become cynical, but to become unshakable. If a friend betrayed me tomorrow, would I fall apart or respond with calm? If I lost this job, could I still act with virtue? The Stoics didn't fear the worst-case scenario. They rehearsed it, so when life tested them, they didn't flinch. Journaling, not for others, not for style, but for strategy, to capture thoughts before those thoughts ran wild, to notice what was bubbling under the surface before it exploded into words, decisions, or regret. It wasn't writing. It was weaponization of self-awareness. This is Stoic mindfulness. Not a routine, not a retreat, but a responsibility. A commitment to stay aware of what's happening inside you, especially when everything outside you is screaming for your reaction. We've all felt it. That rush of heat in the chest, that tightening in the jaw, that moment when someone says something, and all you want to do is snap, fire back, defend, attack. But the Stoic doesn't react. He recognizes, he breathes, he creates space between stimulus and response. And in that space is sovereignty, because he knows the most powerful person in any room is the one who can choose their response, while everyone else is owned by their emotions. Mindfulness, to the Stoic, is not about controlling every thought. That's impossible. Thoughts will come, but not every thought deserves a seat at your table. Not every emotion deserves a microphone. You learn to separate the noise from the signal, and most of what the mind throws at you is just noise. So how do we use this? Before your next conversation, pause. Before your next decision, breathe. Before your next reply, reflect. Ask, what am I about to say? Why am I saying it? Is this from fear or principle? Is this coming from reaction or reflection? That pause, that moment of internal awareness, can shift the entire direction of what follows. Mindfulness isn't fragility. It's strength on command. It's strategy in silence. It's a blade that stays sheathed because you already know who you are. And no situation gets to hijack that. While others are tossed around by triggers, you stay centered. While others are hijacked by emotion, you move from reason. Because you are not ruled by what happens, you are ruled by how you respond. That's Stoic power. And it begins with one small commitment, repeated, refined, and reinforced, to be here, to be fully present, to be aware, to be the one in command of you. Every day, every moment, especially when it matters most. The word surrender makes most people uncomfortable. It feels like defeat, like weakness, like folding your hand and walking away from something you once believed in. We associate surrender with failure, with losing the fight, with quitting too soon. But the Stoics, they saw it through a completely different lens. To them, surrender wasn't weakness. It was the highest form of strength. Not because you gave up the fight, but because you stopped fighting the wrong thing. Surrender is not about quitting. It's about releasing resistance, resistance to reality, resistance to timing, resistance to truths you no longer want to admit, but already feel. Sometimes, the strongest move you can make is loosening your grip, because gripping too tightly to a plan, to a person, to an outcome you swore was meant to be, can slowly become your prison. The Stoic doesn't cling. He doesn't try to squeeze meaning from something that's expired. He observes, he reflects, and when it's time, he lets go. Not with resentment, but with quiet resolve. He doesn't pretend that everything is in his control. He moves where influence exists and releases where illusion begins. This is the art of strategic surrender. It's the moment you stop asking, "How do I force this to work?" and start asking, "Is this still aligned? Or am I just afraid to let it go?" Letting go is terrifying, especially when your identity has become attached to what you're holding. The project, the relationship, the role, the version of yourself you thought you had to be. But here's the paradox. The more you try to force it, the more it resists you. And the moment you finally loosen your grip, you create space for something better. Not louder, nor shinier, just better because it fits. Most people don't lack effort. They lack the courage to pivot. And pivoting requires you to pay attention. It requires you to ask hard questions like, am I still growing here, or just repeating myself out of fear? Am I staying because it's right, or because I don't know who I'd be without it? Strategic surrender is not giving up on the goal. It's giving up on the attachment to how you thought the goal had to look. So how do you know when to persist and when to let go? Here's a Stoic lens. You persist when the challenge is external, but your internal compass still feels clear. You're tired, maybe even discouraged, but not bitter. Your values are still intact. The path is still honest. You can still feel purpose beneath the pressure. In that case, you keep going. But you pivot when the resistance is internal. When your body tightens every time you show up. When your spirit no longer expands, but contracts. When the fire that once fueled you has been replaced by dread, anxiety, and silent self-betrayal. That's not strength. That's ego dressed in armor. That's fear wearing a mask called commitment. The Stoic has the clarity to notice and the courage to adjust, to surrender. Strategically is to say, I no longer need this to validate me. This chapter is complete, and that's okay. I release what's no longer aligned, so I can return to what's true. It's not emotional collapse. It's emotional discipline. You're not quitting because it's hard. You're quitting because it's hollow. And that is wisdom. Here's what happens when you surrender. Not from fear, but from inner knowing. You stop chasing. You start attracting. You no longer try to wrestle the universe into submission. You become someone it naturally moves with. Because when your hands aren't gripping, they're open. And open hands can receive. This is not weakness. This is mastery. The Stoic doesn't measure strength by how long he holds on. He measures it by how willing he is to let go when the holding becomes misaligned. He doesn't force flow. He finds it through clarity, through honesty, through release. So, if something is no longer growing you, If something is slowly eroding your peace, if something feels heavy for the wrong reasons, you don't need to force it. You need to examine it. And maybe you need to surrender it. Not because it failed, not because you failed, but because you've outgrown the version of you that once needed it. When you learn to surrender, you stop just surviving change. You start dancing with it. Gracefully, powerfully, and with your hands open for what's next. Have you ever thought of someone, a friend, a name you haven't spoken in years, and then your phone lights up with their message, or stumbled upon a book, an article, a line in a stranger's conversation that answered the exact question you didn't even know you were asking? Most people call it coincidence, luck, randomness. But if you're honest, something inside you feels different. Not louder, but deeper. A nudge, a pattern, a whisper that says, "This is not an accident." The Stoics didn't write about signs from the universe the way modern spiritual thinkers do. They didn't chase feathers on sidewalks or angel numbers on license plates. But they weren't blind to pattern. They believed in logos, the intelligent, rational structure of the cosmos. A system that moves with intention, even when you can't understand its choreography in the moment. And when something in life aligned perfectly, when a disruption led to transformation, when an unanswered prayer turned out to be protection, they didn't call it magic. They called it nature, doing what it always does, move with meaning. They paid attention. Later, Carl Jung gave it a name: synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that defy logic but feel undeniably real. And while this isn't Stoic dogma, it fits beautifully into the Stoic mindset. Don't assume. Don't project. But observe. Notice what's happening. Notice when reality starts to echo your inner world. Not every strange alignment is a sign, but some are. And deep down, you know when something feels different. So how do you know when synchronicity is real? Here's what usually marks it. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's subtle, but you feel it in your bones. It usually arrives at a moment of quiet uncertainty. Not when you're demanding answers, but when you're finally open to receive them. Maybe you're at a crossroads. Maybe you're exhausted from trying to figure it out. And then, you hear a sentence, read a passage, bump into a conversation that hits different. It doesn't explain everything, but it points you somewhere. And that feeling in your chest, that peaceful pull, that's what makes it real. Synchronicity is often less about external signs and more about inner recognition. It feels like something you already knew, but forgot. Something within you whispers, "Yes, this matters. Pay attention." And here's what makes synchronicity so powerful. It reflects what's already happening inside you. If you're searching for truth, truth starts echoing around you. If you're trying to heal, healing words start showing up in strange places. If you're ready to pivot, new directions begin to surface. Not through magic, but through alignment. The outer world responds to the frequency of your inner world. That's not superstition. That's awareness. The Stoic doesn't chase signs. He doesn't live waiting for miracles. But he does notice. He watches patterns. He tracks timing. He pays attention to how life moves around him, without becoming dependent on what he sees. Because signs are not instructions. They are indicators. They don't dictate your next move. They offer a chance to move with life instead of against it. So what do you do when synchronicity shows up? You don't cling. You don't idolize the messenger. You simply listen and ask yourself, what is this aligning with inside me? You follow the thread, not blindly, but with grounded curiosity. You test it. You reflect. You remain still enough to know the difference between ego chasing meaning and truth being revealed. This is where Stoicism meets trust. You don't abandon reason. But you recognize that some things move beyond reason and yet feel more real than anything logic could explain. You take the signs seriously, but not emotionally. You use them as data, not dependency. Because the Stoic knows the universe doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And if you're too loud inside, you'll miss it. Synchronicity isn't magic. It's meaning becoming visible. It's the confirmation that your internal compass is beginning to match the direction of your external reality. And when that happens, you don't need to force anymore. You just move. Not aimlessly. Not in fear. But with awareness. With strategy. With an understanding that something larger is walking beside you. And always has been. You can want success. You can work for abundance. You can even deserve it. Earn it. Sacrifice for it, and still not receive it. Why? Because wanting isn't enough. Because effort without openness doesn't unlock anything. Because the door can be wide open, but if you've convinced yourself you don't belong inside, you'll never walk through. Most people don't fail because life didn't offer them something. They fail because, when it showed up, they weren't available for it. Receptivity isn't about wishing harder. It's about becoming someone who can hold what they once only hoped for. And that's not just emotional work, it's philosophical training. The Stoics had a word for it, amor fati. Love of fate. Not just acceptance, not reluctant tolerance, but deep, full-hearted embrace of everything that happens, especially the unexpected. Because when you resist what is, you also resist what's trying to find you. Abundance doesn't just go to the strongest. It flows toward the most open, but most of us, without realizing it, are closed. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We carry silent beliefs that filter every opportunity. And the worst part, we don't even know they're there. We say we want success, but secretly think we're not ready. We say we want love, but flinch every time someone sees us too closely. We say we want peace but cling to chaos because it's familiar. These beliefs don't scream. They whisper. And they sabotage from the inside out. Let's name a few of the most common ones. Not to judge them, but to free ourselves from them. I'm not ready yet. This one sounds responsible, noble, even. Like you're just preparing. Doing your due diligence. But often, it's just fear with a calendar. You wait for perfect timing, perfect clarity, perfect credentials. But the Stoic knows you become ready through engagement. Readiness isn't a gate. It's a byproduct of action. The way to sharpen the sword is to start swinging it. Rewrite it. I grow by showing up. Clarity comes from motion, not delay. I'm not worthy of this. This one cuts deep, because it often starts young. A comment, a comparison, a silent standard no one could meet. And over time, you carry the belief that worth must be earned externally through status, beauty, productivity. But Stoicism teaches your worth is intrinsic. It's not a vote. It's not a popularity metric. It's a fact measured by your character, not your resume. Rewrite it. My worth is settled. I choose how to honor it. I don't chase validation. I walk in value. Good things never last. You've been burned before. So now, even when life is finally kind, you brace for the fall. You withhold joy, thinking that'll soften the next heartbreak. But the Stoic doesn't fear change. He expects it. He welcomes it. He lives in full presence not because things last, but because they don't. He doesn't protect himself by withholding. He protects his peace by staying here. Rewrite it. I choose to enjoy this fully, even if it ends. I don't fear endings. I expand through them. When you replace fear-based thoughts with principle-based clarity, you stop blocking what's been circling around you for years. You stop repelling what you keep asking for. Because sometimes the only thing standing between you and what you want is the version of you that doesn't yet believe you can hold it. Receptivity is not weakness. It's courage in stillness. It's not passivity. It's strategic surrender. It's the moment you stop chasing and start allowing. Not from entitlement, but from grounded certainty. It's the moment you say, I'm no longer apologizing for being ready. I'm no longer shrinking to fit what's familiar. I'm no longer pretending I'm not built for more. When you step into that space, your energy shifts. You no longer speak to impress. You speak from presence. You no longer beg for timing. You trust your alignment. And the world begins to respond. Not always instantly, but accurately. Because the universe doesn't deliver on pressure. It delivers on clarity. So here's the shift. Let go of the clenched fist. The grip of control. The emotional tension that says, I need this or I'll break. Open your hands. Open your posture. Open your mind. And say, I'm here. I'm open. I'm ready. Without rushing. That's when abundance begins to find you. Not because it wasn't there before, but because you finally stopped hiding from it. Most people believe success is a matter of effort. Push hard. Outwork. Outlast. Grind until it bends. But the Stoics saw through that illusion. They understood that force without alignment doesn't create success. It creates friction, exhaustion, and ultimately, disconnection. You might build something impressive from sheer effort, but if it costs you your peace, your presence, and your soul, was it really a win? There's another way. Not easier, but wiser. Not softer, but smarter. It's called flow. And it's not about doing less. It's about doing differently. Instead of constantly pushing through resistance, you begin flowing toward where energy already wants to move. Instead of fighting reality, you learn to dance with it, to cooperate with what is, rather than wrestle it into what you think it should be. This is the shift from force to flow, from ego-driven action to essence-aligned movement. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished." He wasn't preaching passivity. He was pointing to a deeper rhythm, a natural intelligence, a pace that honors both precision and patience. When your inner world is aligned with your outer action, you move like water, strong but fluid, quiet but undeniable, unstoppable, not because you crash through things, but because you move around them with grace. Modern science calls this the flow state. It's that mental and emotional zone where time seems to vanish, where focus sharpens, where your actions feel effortless, even when they're intense. Athletes feel it on the court, writers in the middle of a perfect sentence, musicians during the solo they didn't rehearse but somehow already knew. It's not magic. It's biological alignment. Flow happens when three things align. Your skills match the challenge. Your intention is clear. Your attention is fully present. In other words, flow is not random. It's earned. And the Stoics lived in pursuit of it, even if they never used the word. They didn't need to dominate the ocean. They learned how to ride the wave. So how do you practice this? How do you stop pushing and start flowing? It begins with something I call the minimal friction strategy. Not minimal effort, not laziness, but minimal resistance. Start by noticing, where in your life are you constantly forcing that job that drains you? That relationship where you over-explain, that project that feels like walking through cement. Where are you trying to control outcomes that will never be yours to hold? Where are you gripping instead of aligning? Now, this isn't an invitation to give up. Hard things are still hard. Growth still requires pressure. But there's a difference between challenge with meaning and resistance from misalignment. The Stoic learns to spot that difference. And when something feels like a constant wall, he doesn't keep punching. He steps back. He repositions. He asks, is this a test of resilience or a call to realign? This is where most people miss the mark. They think flow means comfort, that it's supposed to feel easy. It's not. Flow is not soft. It's strategic. It's high-level movement, born from deep internal congruence. It still demands courage, presence, discipline. But the difference is energy. When you're in flow, your energy replenishes itself as you move. You're not draining just to keep going. You're being fueled by the very thing you're doing. Here's the paradox. The more you align, the less effort you need. The more you resist, the more effort is never enough. And no amount of hustle can replace that. You can build a life on force, but it will be brittle. It will demand everything from you and give back almost nothing in return. But a life built on flow feels different. It feels whole. It expands with you, not at your expense. So ask a different question. Not, how hard can I push? But, where is life already inviting me to move with ease? Where is the tension telling you to pause? Where is the resistance asking you to shift? And most importantly, what would happen if you stopped forcing and started trusting? Because, here's the truth, what is truly meant for you will never need to be forced into submission. It will require effort, yes, but it won't feel like war. It will feel like momentum, like movement with meaning. Let go of forcing. Live by flow. And watch how life quietly, subtly, perfectly begins to meet you halfway. Not because you screamed louder, but because you finally moved in rhythm with the current that was always trying to carry you. Visualization often gets a bad name. People think it's for dreamers, for those who'd rather imagine than act. They picture someone sitting in a quiet room, eyes closed, pretending they already have the dream job, the perfect relationship, the million-dollar business waiting for the universe to deliver. But that's not Stoicism. That's fantasy. The Stoic doesn't visualize to feel good. He visualizes to get ready, to sharpen, to rehearse, to walk the battlefield in the mind before his feet ever touch the ground. Marcus Aurelius didn't close his eyes and imagine glory. He imagined loss, betrayal, illness, failure, not to manifest it, but to neutralize its surprise, to look potential pain in the face and train himself to meet it with calm. Seneca did the same. He practiced voluntary discomfort. He visualized life without luxury, without title, without wealth. So, if it were ever taken from him, he wouldn't collapse. He would remain sovereign. To the Stoics, visualization wasn't about escaping reality. It was about engaging it more skillfully. It wasn't about fantasy. It was mental readiness. You don't visualize for comfort. You visualize for control under pressure. You rehearse not to avoid stress, but to enter it without losing yourself. Modern psychology has a name for this mental rehearsal. Top performers use it constantly. Athletes before a championship game, soldiers before a mission, surgeons before a high-risk operation. They mentally walk through every step of what's ahead. They see the scenario before it arrives, so when it does, their body, their breath, their reflexes are already prepared. They've already felt the pressure, so they don't freeze when it's real. No panits, no shock, just presence. But the truly wise go even deeper. They don't just rehearse actions, they rehearse emotions. They practice what it feels like to be calm while being challenged, to be composed while being misunderstood, to be decisive while being afraid. This is emotional rehearsal, and it's what separates calm authority from reactive chaos. Imagine this. You're about to give a presentation. Most people visualize the success, the applause, the confidence, the praise. That's fine. But that's not Stoic. The Stoic visualizer asks deeper questions. What will I do if I forget my lines? What happens if someone questions my credibility in front of the room? Can I stay grounded if nothing goes to plan? That's not pessimism. That's preparation. Or take a relationship. A difficult conversation with someone you love. Most people visualize themselves saying the right thing, but the Stoic visualizer doesn't rehearse the speech. He rehearses his stillness. He imagines himself breathing through the tension, listening when triggered, responding with clarity instead of defensiveness. This is how you train your nervous system to stay neutral under pressure, to stay you even when everything around you pulls for reaction. Because life doesn't reward how well you perform when things go smoothly. It rewards how well you remain yourself when things don't. Stoic visualization is not about controlling outcomes. It's about mastering your internal climate so you can meet whatever comes with readiness and reason. And this works across every area of life. In your career, don't just picture the promotion. Picture navigating rejection without shame. Picture holding integrity when the deal doesn't go through. Picture staying calm when you're misunderstood in a meeting and speaking with truth, not tension. In relationships, don't just imagine the highlight reel. Imagine staying present during conflict. Imagine listening without needing to win. Imagine loving without attachment to control. In personal growth, don't just visualize success. Visualize discipline. Visualize saying no. Visualize being alone and still standing strong. Because the real point of visualization isn't perfection, it's preparation. Not just for the wins, but for the weight that comes with them. It's mental armor, emotional rehearsal, and spiritual training for the friction that always comes with forward movement. The Stoic visualizer doesn't sit back and hope life goes his way. He sharpens his mind so that any way life goes, he's ready. He sees it. He feels it. He trains for it, so that when life arrives loud, unexpected, imperfect, he doesn't flinch. He responds. He leads. He endures. So stop fantasizing. Start preparing. Stop picturing applause. Start rehearsing alignment. Because one day soon, pressure will knock. And when it does, you'll either fall back into reaction or rise into readiness. The difference is what you visualized before it arrived. You don't have to force life to go your way. You don't have to manipulate outcomes, control every variable, or fight the current until your strength runs dry. There's another path. One quieter, but infinitely more powerful. You don't chase alignment. You create space for it. You become still, present, clear, and from that space, alignment meets you halfway. The universe is not your enemy. It's not some cold, indifferent force trying to test you. It's your greatest ally if you stop wrestling it and start moving with it. It's not meant to be controlled. It's meant to be understood, to be listened to be partnered with. And the way you build that partnership isn't through control, it's through clarity, through stillness, through refined intention, through the decision to trust wisdom over reaction. When you let go of the need to grip every outcome, you don't become passive. You become precise. You stop chasing and start receiving, not from laziness, but from inner calibration, from the quiet confidence that says, I've done my part. Now I let life respond. That's not weakness. That's wisdom under pressure. It's the kind of success that isn't loud, but lasting. You don't force flow. You become aligned with it. By mastering your emotions, by knowing when to act and when to wait, by walking with inner order in a world built on chaos. So if this video helped shift something in you, if you now see that control isn't the goal, and that power lives in presence, Then let this moment be your first act of alignment. Hit the like button and comment, "I surrender to the flow." Not as a phrase, as a practice, as a quiet decision to stop resisting what's trying to reach you. Because that choice to release instead of grip, to align instead of chase, that one shift can change everything. And if you're ready for the next step on this journey, if you want to build a daily life that reflects the principles we just explored, then watch next, the Daily Stoic Blueprint for Peace and Power. It's not just another video. It's the foundation for a new way of living, one rooted in strategy, stillness, and inner gravity. Because your alignment has already begun. Now, keep going.